everybody? We're going to be started in 1 minute, so let's get the camera ready to go. All of y'all need to come down close to the front so we look like we have the largest crowd in existence. Madam panelists.
Oh, I went from the screen?
Yeah. Let me let the video go, and then we'll take the panel up front.
Okay.
We're supposed to have several other folks as they come, but even if we don't have them, Betty and I will do our thing. We will be amazing. It'll be like a Vegas show. This is the most important person in the room that you need to know. Okay? This is Chelsea Sessions. She's a graduate student in the EMPA program. That's the Online Masters of Public Administration. And she is my new brain, and she's going to be taking care of everything. I'm Carol G. Robinson. I'm the Associate Dean of External Affairs, and I'm also an associate professor on the faculty. I just want to do a couple of things. I want to thank you all for coming out. The dean is not here. He's traveling. I believe he's in Spain. So our graduate programs, part of what we do is if you are a student in the Masters of Public Administration program, one of the perks of being in the program is we take you on an international trip. Years ago, we had a president at the university that our current president has picked up on the same trends. And that old president was Granville Sawyer, and he said that TSU should take care of addressing issues in our own backyard and spread out and become international. President Lane has picked up the same kind of emphasis, so we want to expose our students not just to what's going on in Houston and the country, but we also want them to understand they have a role and a place internationally also. So that's the first thing. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be issuing a report. It'll look something like this one. We have what's called the Barbara Jordan Institute and the Mickey Leland Center attached to the School of Public Affairs, and they are basically specialized research centers. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll issue a special report on hunger and poverty in Houston as a follow-up to this panel presentation, and it'll be a part of ongoing efforts that the School of Public Affairs is going to be involved in this space. I just want to touch on a couple of things. So Betty and I met each other at the Blodgett Garden. The Blodgett Garden is one of several urban gardens in the city, and we were kicking off the School of Public Affairs and the Mickey Leland Center. It's the technical name is the Mickey Leland Center on Hunger, Poverty, and World Peace. As most of you know, Congressman Leland spent a lifetime addressing the issue of hunger, created a special caucus in Washington, D.C., and when Dr. Adams became the interim dean of the School of Public Affairs, we were working on trying to re-energize, rejuvenate, and get the Mickey Leland Center back on track to focus on that. So we partnered with Senator Boris Miles, former Senator, now Commissioner Rodney Ellis, to kick off what we were calling the Senate District 13 Food Desert Mitigation Project. We brought together about 15 African-American urban farmers. I learned they're not gardeners, they're farmers, to do a couple of things: strengthen that network, help make them more operationally efficient, and then use that increased strength to strengthen existing farmers market and to create more farmers market across the food desert areas, initially in Senate District 13. Senator Ellis, once we got the program to the implementation stage, when he became commissioner, came on board. So we're going to be expanding the program out to cover the entire Precinct 1. Most of Senate District 13 is inside of Precinct 1. So we're working on that. The other thing, if you're not on the newsletter, our email list, we send out two electronic newsletter. One is the School of Public Affairs newsletter. The second is the Leland Center newsletter. Let me give you my email address. If you send me an email, we will add you to the email list, and you'll get our online newsletters. It is Robinson, ROBINSON _ that is not a hyphen, that's the little other one that's at the bottom, CG at tsu.edu. In addition to the Food Desert Project, we got board approval from the Board of Regents for a 2020 census project called Let's Count People of Color and Low-Income Urban Americans. Over the decades, the centuries since we've been doing the census, I won't go back to the 3/5. I'm just come to modern era. People of color and low-income urban Americans have been undercounted. And one of the things we decided to do, since political redistricting comes off the census numbers, and more importantly in some instances, is the federal distribution of resources, we wanted to get involved in helping Houston and other urban cities around the country get prepared for the 2020 census. In most instances, hey Aljanita, cities usually start trying to get ready for the census the year before. And in a place like Houston, 669 square mile, over 2 million people, it is a difficult proposition to get up and running in a 12 to 18 month window, including the count. And the last census, they tried to use technology. This is supposed to be a more technology-based 2020 census, and they had significant problems with the 2010 census with the technology, and it negatively impacted the count. We want to make sure that the city of Houston and other urban cities across the state primarily and around the country will be ready. We just bought redistricting software. We're going to be teaching graduate students how to do map drawing using the technology, so that not only will we assist with the count, but we'll be prepared to be technical experts in terms of testimony and drawing the maps, whether it's to redistrict justices of peace, county commissioners, city council, state legislatures, congressional districts, and we'll do it for Texas, and we'll do it for anybody in the country who asks us for that support, because one of the things we want to be is a source of technical expertise to help empower people out in the community to address the issues that impact them on a daily life. We have another project we just started working on, and we'll be working on it going forward. We have a urban planning program, a master's and a doctoral degree in urban planning and environmental policy. We're calling this project Future Houston, and we're going to be talking about how the city can plan for not just its physical transformation, but also all the social implications that go along with that in preparing and rebuilding the city, its capital improvement plan, water and sewer. How do we transform Houston into a 21st century city? I'm going to give you 3 quotes, then we'll go to the video and put them in context. The first one is, the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have too much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. And that was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The second one I want to read to you is, ours is the only nation ever to have defined the pursuit of happiness as a fundamental right. That first principle remains basic to our nation and our future. We seek economic growth and a better and abundant life for all Americans. Prosperity is not an end in itself, but because of prosperity, it provides for more humane values, quality and equality. Gary Hart, former senator from Colorado, in a book called A New Democracy back in 1983. And the third quote is out of an op-ed piece written in the New York Times about a study, and the study is by a bunch of economists from Stanford. And the economists go back and they're trying to quantify the American dream. And the American dream is a quote from a book back in the 1930s. And in the book, the historian says that the American dream, that dream of a land in which life would be better and richer and fuller for everyone. And the quote out of that op-ed is, let me give it to you. He says that there are psychological studies that prove that the better off you are, the more prosperous you are, the happy you are. And so part of the reason why we want to have this panel, and I wanted to give you the quotes, is to set this context. It is not just about the money itself, it's because it has transformational power. In the study from Stanford, they make this observation. I describe it this way. It is like a structural cap on upward mobility. America is now starting to look like feudal Europe. The class you're born into, if you're born into poverty, the old mythology and reality was the American dream was available to you. You could achieve a better life than your parent. The data that the economists look at, they got access to IRS data, privacy protected, but they looked at their quantification of it was, when your kid becomes 30, how do they compare to you, their parent, when you were at age 30? And so when they went back and they look at the data in 1940, 92% of kids surpassed their parents by the time they were 30. As you come forward over time, you look at the graph and the data, and that is on a downward cycle. By the 1980s, the latest part of the data they released, it was a 50-50 chance that you would outperform your parents. When you overlay several other pieces of that, there's a guy, used to be the demographer for the state of Texas, Steve Murdoch, writes a lot about the educational trends in the state. And when you look at the educational trends as they relate to African American and Hispanics, and you set them in the bigger context of what will they look like 30 years out from now, at the educational projections they're on, they will be in that group of young people who will be far worse off at 30 and going forward than their parents were. The whole purpose of this conversation today is to say we need to be involved in trying to figure out not just policy but on-the-ground solution. We're doing a good job in the philanthropic community. This is from a public affairs perspective, but we're not necessarily doing a good enough job as the city and the county in terms of policies that make transformational change. It used to be Third Ward. Now the eastern side, the western side of 288 is the Museum District. It used to be the East End. It's now Edo. It used to be the Fourth Ward. Now it's Midtown. Gentrification is a symptom of poverty. Hunger is a symptom of poverty. A lot of the challenge we're trying to deal with, the maladies, is if we address the poverty issue. When I get your email, if you're not already on my email list, I'll send it out to you. There is just, if we just made up our mind to make some transformation in the policies we implement, we can make a fundamental change. If we went to $15 an hour minimum wage, if we increased the earned income tax, they would make fundamental difference in people's life. So the School of Public Affairs, through our Leland Center, are going to be engaged in a substantive way with the community, with elected officials on policy recommendation, and also being a resource to help individuals and community organizations figure out how they can better help themselves. So with that, I'm going to ask either Antron, another one of the graduate students here, to push the PowerPoint so we can hear Dr. Robert Sanborn, if you have one in the program. He's president and CEO of Children at Risk. I used to serve on their board. They do a lot of outstanding research and advocacy around children issues in the city, across the county, and across the state of Texas. Very good source of information. And then we'll have our panelists come forward, and we'll have a presentation from the panelists, a little interaction, we'll take Q&As, and I'll have you out of here on time. So thank you again for coming out.
Do you mind repeating your email?
It's Robinson, ROBINSON, _ C as in cat, G as in George, @tsu.edu.
About an hour ago. I have it right here too, if you need it.
You have the flash?
Yeah.
Okay, can I put on the flash?
Yeah, because we had it up on the computer a minute ago.
It was in there, I don't know what's happening.
I'm Bob Sanborn. I'm President and CEO of Children at Risk. We're a statewide advocacy group, research and advocacy to make sure that every single child in the state of Texas has the opportunity to be successful. One of the key things that we understand about children in the state of Texas is that when we look at, for instance, all the public school kids in the state of Texas, there are about 5 to 6 million of those kids. 60% of our children are growing up in low-income households. 1 in 10 children born in America, born right here in the state of Texas, and 60% of those kids are low income. When you break that down just a little bit more, one of the other things that you understand is we have 440,000 children in the state of Texas that are growing up in families with an income less than $9,000 a year. So we understand that if children are going to be successful, especially those children that are growing up in low-income households, we're going to have to do something different than what we're doing today to make sure that they are successful. One of the other things that's sort of part of growing up poor is food insecurity. And we know that here in Houston, over a quarter of our children don't know where their next meal may come from, or at some point during the week have gone hungry. Children that aren't eating aren't able to study, they're not able to be successful. So as we look across the state of Texas and here at Houston, and we look at these children that are growing up in low-income households below the federal poverty level or in extreme poverty, like those families at 9,000, we have to figure out what can we do. Because if we don't do anything differently, these kids are significantly less likely to graduate from high school, significantly less likely to be part of the workforce, and significantly less likely to have a normal and productive life. So one of the things that we've worked on at Children at Risk and with stakeholders all across the state is how do we change outcomes for those children? How do we make sure that that child who grows up possibly hungry, possibly poor, can still be successful? All of us have stories, right? Where we were kids that were poor and we grew up and we ended up being fine. But the fact of the matter is, those stories, my story, possibly your story, were celebrated because we're sort of this rags to riches. But how do we live in a state where those stories aren't anomalies, but indeed this is the norm? Every child who grows up poor should be able to enter into the workforce and to be successful. It shouldn't be a special story. It should be a normal story. And when we look at those normal stories, we can figure out through the data, what is it that makes those kids successful? What are the things that we can do? One of the things that we understand is that by and large, some adult has come through and is holding those children by the hand in some special way to help them be successful. It might have happened through an engagement in your church. It might have happened in your school where teachers took a special interest in you. But along the way, maybe some parent helped you. But along the way, someone actually was very engaged. And when that person is not engaged, you're less likely to be successful. In this state, we don't also have a policy for parenting. What do we do for parents who possibly grew up poor themselves, whose parents had low levels of educational attainment, and who don't understand what it means to be a parent and to get the stress of being a parent relieved? We don't have a policy in this state of making sure parents have all the tools necessary to be successful. Furthermore, we don't do much in the area of early education and childcare. We need to do a significantly better job in our state of making sure poor parents who are working parents in the state of Texas have a place to put those children so that their kids can be successful. We also need to talk about high quality pre-K, high quality K through 12, because historically in the United States, the way children move from one economic class to a higher economic class has been through a quality public education. And finally, we need to do more at making sure that kids are going to college. Kids need to get a certificate, a 2-year degree, or a 4-year degree. In the state of Texas, we send far fewer kids to college than any other state in the union. We do an excellent job of recruiting kids from other states who've gone to college in Louisiana and Oklahoma, but we need to do a better job of taking care of our own. We're not doing a good job there. If we can do some of these things that are evidence-based and proven, we can begin to turn this cycle around poverty and our children. Because right now in the state of Texas, here we are, the richest state and the richest nation in the history of the world, yet we still have this very high rate of low-income kids. I hope today is going to be a great day for you guys, and I hope there's a lot of stuff that you learn, because there's too much to be done here in the state of Texas to make sure our kids are successful. One of the questions that people often ask is, when you look at hunger, what could we do here in Houston to make sure that kids don't go hungry, so that they start off on the right foot and they get going? One of the things that we have to understand is that to date, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has bent over backwards to make sure that we feed our families as much as possible. But what we've done wrong in Texas is that we really haven't been open to that partnership and making sure that we're doing everything possible to feed hungry children and feed hungry families. One of the interesting things is that we often think that Thanksgiving or Christmas is sort of the hungry time. We have a Super Bowl of food and a big Thanksgiving feast. But indeed, summer is the hungriest time for our children, because free school breakfasts, free school lunches are no longer available. We only use about 11% of the federal funds available to us in the state of Texas to feed children during the summer. These are funds that are ready and willing, yet we're not using them to make sure that we're feeding our hungry children. We don't do a good job of making sure that we're accessing SNAP or food stamp benefits in our state. Our state has traditionally taken this stance of making it a little bit more difficult for families in need to get these funds. If we're going to really end hunger, it's not by having more access to the food bank. It's by having more access to SNAP benefits so that you can go to your grocery store and buy the food that's necessary. All of these funds, all of these benefits are available to our families, yet we're not doing a good job of accessing them. When we look nationally at access, one of the things that we see is in the state of Texas, Latino families, by and large, don't access a lot of benefits in regards to food, and they're actually under-accessing in large numbers. So there's so much more that we could do there. I'll tell you a brief story. A couple of years ago, a couple of legislative sessions ago, we saw that school breakfast was not being used in the state of Texas. And by working with the Department of Agriculture, they said, listen, if a school has over 80% of its kids that are low income, we'll do free universal breakfast to everyone in that school. So even if some of those kids don't qualify, we'll do it for everyone. We went to the state legislature. We said, listen, let's pass a bill that if it's over 80%, that schools need to do breakfast. The answer we got back was, these kids need to be eating breakfast with their families. We think that's a good idea, but these are kids that don't have the food at home. We changed it, we reframed it the next session, and we said, you know, this represents the $350 million investment in Texas agriculture. When we went to the Texas state legislature and we talked about an investment in Texas agriculture, it quickly went through the system. And so sometimes it's all about reframing it when it comes to food. When that bill passed, in one fell swoop, 1 million more children every day were getting free breakfast. And when kids get that first meal, it goes a long way towards their academic success, and they're beginning to move out of poverty. Another question that's often asked is this idea of, can we do something differently than four-year colleges in the state of Texas so the kids get into the workforce more quickly? And I often hesitate to answer this question because I hear from a lot of public officials about this idea that college isn't for everyone. But what does it mean when our state sends fewer kids to college than any other state already? And I start to get this idea that what public officials are saying is that maybe Texas kids shouldn't go to four-year college. My answer is that we have a lot of very smart kids in our state that really deserve a four-year college. And we need to do a better job of getting those kids to four-year schools, to two-year schools, and to also making sure that they graduate. We don't do a very good job of graduating our kids that work very hard to get into college. We need to do a lot better job. When we see that only 33% of our adult population in Texas has a four-year degree compared to 56% in Massachusetts, we have a long ways to go in our state to make sure that our very smart kids can join that workforce. Keep this in mind. Right now, when we look at eighth graders and we track them all the way through 6 years after college, only 22% of kids who grow up in Texas are getting a career certificate, a two-year degree, or a four-year degree. The 33% number represents kids from other states as well. So of our own kids, 22% are getting it. Yet 65% of the jobs in Texas need one of those three things. We need to do a much better job of getting more kids through high school and through certificate, two-year, and four-year degrees. I'm Bob Sanborn. I'm President and CEO of Children at Risk. We're a
Turn on the lights. So. Good. Ms. Wiggins.
Thank you.
We're joined by Councilmember Edwards. I don't even want you to get that far in. I want to make an addendum to my program. Councilmember and I know each other in a couple of different capacities. But why I would like her to come up, in my notes after we talk about food and hunger, I had a little note about artificial intelligence. I know all of y'all have been following robotics, automation, and the like. And one of the questions, depending on who you read at any minute, it's either going to wipe out all the jobs in the world, or it's going to wipe out all the jobs and create all these other new jobs. And will people have the skills for all the new jobs it creates, or if they get rid of all the job, well, I don't know what we're going to do. But the mayor, I guess in his last State of the City address, talked about trying to build a tech startup innovation zone. And the reason I'd like you to say a little bit about that is because I think that's one of the things we're going to have to integrate into this. If poverty is more or at about equal with race as an indicator of educational achievement issues, and we have poverty and race issues in Houston, and we bring a lot of startup tech companies in and they grow, we're going to have to do something to get the indigenous population of young people of color in the city ready to participate in those economic opportunities. So I appreciate you coming out. I know you have a busy day tomorrow with council, and thank you for giving us a little update. And thank you, Dr. Wiggins, for letting my council member go. I know how these elected officials have like 15 events in the evening.
I'm from Detroit, so I understand.
Thank you so much for that introduction and for the opportunity to address the crowd. I am really excited to be here. I'm Councilmember Amanda Edwards. I'm one of the at-large council members. And so in addition to your district council member, you have 5 people who've been elected to represent the city as a whole. And so I'm one of those 5. What Carol was talking about was about the mayor's task force for technology and innovation. I chaired that, I ran that task force, and what we looked at was the question of how could we build an innovation economy. And so when we think about the economy tomorrow, how can we get Houston on the map where we're creating an environment where we're producing jobs that are heavily concentrated, that require venture capital investment. And as you talk about that type of growth, so let's use Chicago for example. In the last several years, 5 years, that they've had their innovation economy efforts, their economy has gone from about $390 million in venture capital investment to $1.7 billion. And so that's a game changer for an economy if you can get it to take off in the way that Chicago's did. But what does that mean for our communities? What does that mean for those that are on the margin? And so when we're having these conversations about tech and innovation, people kind of close their ears. That doesn't seem related to some of the urban social issues that we face. And I would argue to the contrary. It's very much related to those urban issues, because if you're getting trained and if you're getting educated for a job of yesterday, guess what? You're not going to have that opportunity tomorrow. You have to be trained and have that education for the jobs that will exist tomorrow, not the jobs that existed yesterday. We just saw a presidential election, right, where jobs was at the center of that discussion. And what did they do? You had one presidential candidate able to talk to a population whose job may have gone away 20, 30 years ago, right? But he talked to them. Now, he stirred up a whole lot of other stuff with them, but he talked to them about that need for jobs. We had another candidate who did not get that messaging out to that population, and now you see what the results have been. So the question of what those jobs are and how those jobs, no matter where you are, you can be in very rural America, but those jobs and that job availability will continue to evolve. So if we're not teaching and making part of the conversation for all populations what tomorrow's economy is going to be, we're not going to be prepared. And that's when you're going to see increased hunger, increased poverty, and it's going to be further exacerbated. I want to give you one statistic. So for every one tech job that is created, that's 5 additional jobs. So most people think of like tech as a space where it's displacing jobs or getting rid of the jobs that we're accustomed to. While that does happen in some instances with automation and things like that, there is no denying that. It is a job creator. So when you think about how to reinvigorate an economy, you got to think about how we can get people to work. And getting people to work in a way that is equitable is important. So what do we have to do? We have to train people in our education system to be prepared for those jobs. So no longer do I want you to glaze over, your eyes to glaze over, your ears to close when you hear people start talking about tech and innovation work, because in truth, tech and innovation work is what you need to be thinking about, even if you don't understand it. Apple just came to HCC and partnered with HCC this year in terms of an application, building an apps course, essentially. So it's like building apps for your iPhone or what have you. Having the skill set to be able to produce apps, those are going to be some of the jobs that are going to be available for those that are coming out of HCC, TSU, and that's what we have to be thinking about. And we also have to be thinking about it with respect to our young people and our really young people. So our youth who are thinking about what they want to go in, don't be afraid of STEM. because those where the jobs are going to go. So always know, it's kind of a question of a map. You know where you're going, you won't get lost. If you don't know where you're going or where you're trying to be, that's when you get lost. And so we have to do a better job of making sure that we're part of that conversation, and that we don't just say that's for somebody else, because it's not. So I'm really happy to be before you, because we've now been making some recent strides. We're going to be creating a tech and innovation district hopefully soon, and some other things, but I just wanted to put that on your minds as something we're working on, but not something where you should feel like this is not a conversation that pertains to you, because this is the job and the economy of the future. Does anybody have questions about that? I'm sorry to hijack y'all's forum. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ms. Wiggins, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. First off, I have to let you guys know that I'm a Houstonian for 2 months. I just was recruited from Detroit, Michigan, where I did work with hunger. I was the child nutrition director for Detroit Public Schools. And so some of the things I see happening here in Houston is very reflective, and it's a reflection of what's happening in Detroit. While you guys had your economic cold, we had pneumonia in both lungs with no medication. And we had to deal with issues of food insecurity, food deserts, no transportation, and a lot of other things, and also a school system that went from 200,000 kids down to 45,000. A lot of the U-Hauls that left Detroit came to Houston and other places in the South. So food and hunger really became one of my focal points, particularly in our schools. But then when I thought, Houston, oh, it's going to be much better. I saw all these highways and all this new stuff and gentrification here and there and everywhere. I said, it's got to be better. Well, I had my staff look into some figures for me, and I found out that Harris County food insecurity rate is 26% among kids ages 1 to 18. That's 10% higher than the national average. What also I found, just from my own observation of being here and being in child nutrition program, is food equity is a real issue here in Houston. Not only food equity, but transportation equity and housing equity and anything that deals with the human condition. It's a problem. So one of the things that I intended to do, and Dr. Sanborn, he gave a lot of information that I was going to give, but he gave a lot of information about the child nutrition program and its impact. You have to understand that there's plenty of empty calories available. Go to a gas station. Go to a gas station. After I got older, I found out you sold beer in gas stations where people would drive cars away. I also looked at what was on the shelf. Empty calories. They consider beef jerky a protein. All those snacks and sugary drinks and hard press, and then all the milk, one little section there. And so that became an issue about what is available for our community to eat. Cheap food. We as Americans demand cheap food. That's something that we demanded. Not good food, but cheap food, calories. So what drives obesity in our children is these empty calories and lack of physical activity, because I don't know about in Houston. In Detroit, we don't let our kids go outside because we're afraid that their lives will be in danger. There's no rec centers open, the school is closed, there's no community pools, and it's just quite frankly dangerous. So kids are indoors, they're watching TV, and they're doing other things, so there's no physical activity. We took home economics out of our public school system and replaced it with high-stake testing. And that's where kids did learn things about how to eat. Food literacy is a real issue. I see all these beautiful gardens being grown around Houston, and I'm wondering, where's the curriculum associated with that? We can teach kids to grow food, but if we don't teach kids, we teach kids about good food, if we don't teach them to grow it, we don't teach them the lessons associated with making choices. choices, healthy choices. We're really not doing anything. We're really, it's, you know, it's that old biblical, teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. So what I'm supposed to talk about is how does school nutrition play into all of this? Well, something called the Healthy and Hunger-Free Act of 2010 was passed. Everybody, if you have a certain political persuasion, they call it Michelle's program. It's not Michelle's program. I'm proud to say that I came from the state where my senator, Debbie Stabenow, was the person who put it forth. We had the Healthy and Hunger-Free Act. What Michelle Obama did, and we're so grateful for, she embraced it. She made it visible. Because, as Dr. Sanborn said, until we talked about it in economics, farm to school. One of the biggest programs that came out of the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 was farm to school, buying local produce. These community gardens that we see, which are now called urban farms, kind of slid in because it was the small rural farmers who voted a certain way who got the benefit of it. They had an opportunity to sell their fruits and vegetables to schools. We are a $40 billion enterprise in this country. And so local farmers got an opportunity to sell their food to schools. But the main thing that happened with that is that we started introducing new nutrition standards that people are saying are awful. But the data is beginning to show that healthier meals that are more nutrient dense is improving test scores. They did a statewide study in California. Kids are not turning down healthier food. They're not turning them down. They're eating more fresh fruits and vegetables. We're working on now trying to have less marketing. So kids are now learning about how to make a good choice. So if we fast forward now, that's a background. There's a couple of people who I worry about, a couple of kids I worry about, no one talks about. They're the kids at the end of the cul-de-sac. The kids who supposed to live in suburbia, whose family is just doing great, but they're going to food pantries Wednesday and Thursday because they get paid on Friday just like everybody else. So Jalen and Caitlin aren't doing that well. So those are the kids who we also need to bring into this conversation. They're at risk because they're not having the calories they need to support good health. So in the school nutrition program, what we're doing here in Houston, I can tell you, we have universal breakfast to feed those 76% of the kids 1 to 18 here in Houston are eligible for free and reduced lunch that attend HISD. I just want you to do the math in your head. There's 218,000 kids in HISD, and they all don't live. What's that place? Triple Oaks or nowhere up there, wherever. River Oaks. They all don't live. I had to learn that. So they all don't live in River Oaks. So 76% of our children are eligible. So we have a universal breakfast program in HISD. We also have something called CEP, which is Community Eligibility Provision, which allows 191 of our 288 schools to feed every child in that school at no charge. One of the things you got to get, take it out of your vocabulary. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody paying for it. So it's a meal at no charge. So 191 of our schools feed at no charge. We also have something called the After School At-Risk Supper Program. I don't know if it's because I'm from Detroit or they feel sorry for me or what, but I'm going to see the Assistant Agricultural Commissioner tomorrow in Austin. And what I'm going to request of that commissioner, and Madam Chairwoman, Councilwoman, I want you to tell you what I'm requesting. I'm requesting that the whole city of Houston be declared eligible for at-risk supper program. And that's because of food equity. Because in Houston Public Schools, we have no boundaries. So you can enroll your kids anywhere you want. So what happens is that a kid who's living in 5th Ward, is that? Okay. They can go to Lamar. Do you know that Lamar has a 52% poverty rate? 50 because they're recruiting the kids out, of the parents are seeking what they think is better education because they're going up there. So what happens is now that kid's denied the opportunity to participate in things like the at-risk after-school program. So we're going to solve that equity problem there because of open enrollment. So I'm hoping that, you know, Mr. Sanborn and some more people I'm meeting with can solve the problem. I had the USDA come to my office since I was from Michigan, and he said that Texas is not using their child nutrition dollars. And I don't know if that's out of ignorance or what, but I think a lot of it has to do with some immigration policies that we don't talk about, where our Hispanic, our brown brothers and sisters are not giving us the information because they think that they're going to be deported. We had that issue in Michigan as well. But with CEP and the Summer Food Service Program, right now we have a Summer Food Service Program here in Houston. I had one, and the rec department had one, and a not-for-profit over here had one, and Susie May had one. Why are we sitting here dissipating all of our abilities by everybody having one? We should come together, leverage ourselves, and have a summer feeding program that runs from the last day the school is out to the first day school opens. We should find ways to incorporate Saturday and Sunday feeding, because guess what? Hunger don't take a vacation on Saturday and Sunday. One of the things that we see in the school lunch lines is that on Monday, we got more kids in line, and on Friday, we got more kids in line because they loading up for the weekend. They literally tell you they loading up. So we need to start thinking, if we want to start thinking about something that's policy, Mr. Robinson, and my maiden name is Robinson, I was going to tell you. We family. If we want to think about something that we can do that would be very effective in this city, is that these different organizations that's sponsoring all this program get together and have a unified approach. And I say that because who is the biggest, most knowledgeable provider of child nutrition meals in the city? Anybody know? It's Houston ISD. We do 49 million meals a year. Why would all these other people, I tell not-for-profits all the time, why don't you do your not-for-profit business? Let me do my feeding. I know how to feed kids. I know how to feed 900 kids in an hour and a half. I want somebody else to do that. So part of what I want to do as my effort, and that's what I did in Detroit, was to go to the agency, said, okay, we're the meal providers. You do your programming. You do what you're supposed to do. Let us feed children, and we'll feed them well. We have the resources, the infrastructure. If any of you have all gone out there on Bennington Road, you'll see we got a 222,000 square foot food manufacturing facility. You know how many kids we could feed out of that if those populations were made available to us? So I challenge us to say, one thing that we can do, we can effectively feed every child in Houston if you forget about what your mission is and somebody else, and we focus on hunger and how we're going to relieve hunger. And there's also the ability to feed kids on Saturdays and Sundays outside of school hours. There's so much federal money available to feed children. I always said child nutrition programs, the closest thing that our kids have to entitlement. I was testified before Congress, and I was talking to the senator from South Dakota, and he says, well, you know, we shouldn't be feeding these children. I said, guess what? These are the kids who are fighting our wars. So it's a value proposition. These are the poor children who go into the military. So if you don't keep them healthy, you're going to have to bring back the draft. So he thought for a minute, so, oh no, I said, well, that's what it amounts to. Poor children. The Secretary of the Army said that 25% of the recruits had to be turned down due to poor nutritive status. So I said, okay, don't feed them, draft the rich kids who also have some problems with drugs and some other stuff. So, you know, child nutrition is not the total answer, but it's the strongest web that we have in our social service net for our families, to support our families. In Houston, I no longer call it a free lunch application, I call it a meals benefit application, because it is a benefit that these children, just by the nature of them being poor, are able to access. So I want to thank you very much.
Y'all better give her a hand. I don't want to sound like one of those elected officials on TV. Lester couldn't be here with us, and I don't know Jasmine, so I don't know if she's here. But if she's not, I want to just make a couple observations, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Most people didn't know that why we have free meals in school was because of the military, because so many young people at the time were not ready physically for the war, and they were getting turned down, so Congress put free lunch programs in school. So the reason why you have free lunch is so you could be healthy enough.
It was administered out of the Defense Department.
Yeah.
Until they found out there was money in agriculture.
Yeah, so that's why you have free lunch program. Let me touch on something. Lester King is a graduate of the PhD program in the urban planning program at the school here, and he did a report a couple of years ago, and the gist of it, he looked at the cost of transportation and housing to people in the city. African Americans and Hispanics are below the median income in the city, and what his study found is that, and maybe a little lower now because the price of gasoline has ticked down, about 45% of the household income was dedicated to housing and transportation. And one of the issues, I used to serve on city council years ago. I had this running dialogue. The essential state of mind, the question, the way it's described, is that Metro's primary responsibility is to reduce congestion. And my argument was really Metro's primary responsibility should be to provide transportation to those folks in the city who did not have a car and needed access to transportation to get from home to work, from home to food, from home to health care. And if you look at the data, and when we put out our report, a lot of this will be in there. We have what's called a GIS program. A lot of the things we're going to be doing over the coming years are things I tried to get done when I was in elected office. I gave up on that because it was just too hard. So we're going to do a lot of mapping work. We're going to do a lot of 3D development. So when we get together by this time next year, and you come in and you look at the city, we'll be able to show you it in 3 dimensionals. We'll be able to show you where empty lots are. We'll be able to show you where building permits are. We'll be able to show you where variances are. If somebody's got a building permit, we can model what the thing is going to look like so it can become more interactive and an empowerment device for the community. We want to look at where, as you point out, I tell people all the time, I used to serve on the community college board. There are 17 school districts that touch on or are inside the city, and they are overwhelmingly Hispanic, steady black, diminishing white, relatively small Asian. There's a study that came out a couple of years ago. It's the most comprehensive data analytics tracking students. The Houston Endowment did it. It is devastating. The Houston Chronicle editorialized on it when it first came out. And they looked at 3 cohorts, 6 years after what would have been those young people's graduation from high school. And when they cut the data, in aggregate, only 1 out of every 4 by 6 years after they graduated from high school had a college degree or an associate degree or some kind of workforce training. When you cut the data by gender and race, it dropped off precipitously. If you were a young African American man, it was about 5 to 7%. African American women were a little better. Hispanic men and women, boys and girls, young men and women were a little bit better. But nobody was climbing out of the double digits. So if we are looking at, here's the other sad thing. There's now more growing data that even with a college education, African Americans and Hispanics are not getting the historic lift of what a higher education degree used to do for you. It used to lift you higher up the income scale. Because of structural inequalities, stagnation, how we want to describe it, for African American or Hispanic, a college degree doesn't generate the kind of income it used to generate. And so when you look at the city of Houston, this is what drove me once I got the opportunity to be in charge of the Leland Center to start this conversation and to push my dean to let's do a lot of the things we're going to do. On the 2010 census data, and we'll have new data in a couple of years, so we'll be able to look at this. Almost one out of every 3 African American and Hispanic family in this city lived in poverty. 1 out of every 3. Now, think about almost 1 out of every 3, and then you start looking at the educational data of what's happening with young African American and Hispanic kids in terms of high school graduation, college readiness, and 6 years after high school graduation, they are not achieving high education attainment. And even with high educational attainment, at least right now, it's not moving the needle in terms of upward economic mobility. What that will mean for this city, which is now a majority minority city, and it is a majority minority city built on young Hispanics. So if these trends hold, we're going to have significant issues. When I was on council, Amanda, the Greater Houston Partnership put out their first 10-year strategic plan. And I read the plan, and it had all the correct buzzwords, but there was something missing. And a couple weeks later, something came across my desk from a group, I think they were called Policy Link. And the light bulb went on, because the title of the report was Shared Prosperity. And I said, that was it. That's what was missing. The partnership talked about the 10 areas they were going to concentrate on trying to drive job growth in the city. They talked about education, but it just didn't match up. And I'm still not sure. A couple years ago, I went to Austin. I'm still a big advocate for this. I wish somebody would take it and run with it. So if you went to my mother's house today, she lives on the East Coast, so they have basements. When the first 4 kids were back to back to back to back, then we had 2 accidents. But we still love them. There are still the pictures of her first 4 kids shaking the hand of the mayor when you graduate from high school. I went to a big city in New Jersey that had 2 high schools, and the mayor came. I'm over 50 years old, and the mayor's name is Mayor Kramer. I went to Austin, and I got the legislature to pass Texas Academic College Scholarship Day, because I thought we should support and celebrate academic achievement if it was one of the drivers of upward economic mobility and a better life, like we do athletics in Texas. The Houston Chronicle is a shrinking newspaper, but once a year it has a big sports section. You want to know what day that is? The day after National Signing Day. And so I went to Austin and I tried to get Texas Academic College on a certain date. They moved the date because they did not, some members of the legislature said they did not want it to interfere with NCAA signing day. This is academic, celebrate the kids. A prior mayor, I tried to talk the prior mayor into doing what Mayor Kramer did. I still think this would be a great thing. On a Saturday morning, every kid in Houston, Texas that was getting a college scholarship should be invited to come to the George R. Brown to shake the hand of Amanda Edwards, the future mayor of the city of Houston. Maybe Mayor Edwards will do that. And say to our kids, the little ones that's looking at big sis, big brother, I want to shake the hand of the mayor. And mom and dad will say, just graduate from high school on time and get a good college scholarship. When I served on the board of HCC, hopefully somebody will pick this up. I saw someplace where USC had recruited a sixth grade kid to be the quarterback of the football team. Sixth grade. So I said, hey, if USC could recruit the quarterback in sixth grade, I'll do this. I'll get the Houston Community College Board of Trustees to create a program where we will send, because the community colleges are the last of the open enrollment. TSU has just reverted back because for a while we had admission criteria. We reverted back to an open enrollment. So essentially, if you graduate from high school and apply, we will admit you to the community college and TSU. So I said to HCC, why don't we just do this? Why don't we just be deceptive? Why don't we send a letter to every sixth grade kid in the Houston Community College service area, to mom and dad, and say if junior or juniorette stays in school, graduates from high school on time, we will give them a scholarship to come to the Houston Community College. To this day, other than the one time I did it, no chancellor, no trustee of the Houston Community College has written to the sixth grade kids in this community to tell them if you stay in school and graduate on time, you could come to the Houston Community College. Now, we pay taxes for it. One person busted me out. Dave Wilson, I had to smile and laugh. He said, oh, you're going to take, I'm saying this on recording, I don't care, you're going to take the money from Westside property taxpayers and educate these young kids. I said, you're darn tootin' I am. We still have not done that. It would make a transformational change to encourage those kids. Now, I'll tell you what HCC has done. Over the 3 years I was there, they sent more than $2 million to the Texans, to the Rockets, and to the Dynamo in exchange for $50,000 a year and a box at Toyota Center. I guess they got a box at the Texan Stadium, and they got a box at the Dynamo. Now, my dad was a busboy, but he did teach me a little something about mathematics. And I didn't think $50,000 in exchange for millions of dollars was a fair trade when I could take the millions of dollars and send young kids to get a college education, transfer to TSU, U of H, or Rice University. We have some real fundamental issues we have to deal with in this city to make a big difference. And you have a legitimate point. I don't think most people realize how the demographics outside the city in the county has changed, and it looks like the demographics in the city. And what's even worse for those folks is the county has been built on a highway model, a free park and ride system, where the inner city metro system is built on a pay-to-ride system. So essentially, if you have a car and live in the suburbs, you get to ride metro, park and ride into the city to work and out of the city to work. If you live in the city and you need to get to work, you have to pay to take the light rail, you have to pay to take the bus, and the light rail system is not even comprehensive enough to move you around. So we've got folks in the city under the median income. If you look at District I, you look at District H, District D is transforming some because of gentrification. You look at District B will probably be the next place that you see significant levels of gentrification. And you look at what's happening with the young people in those schools. We have an open HISD system, most people forget, because that's how HISD settled the litigation against the school district for being discriminatory. So instead of integrating the neighborhood schools, they went to an open enrollment system. So all these public policy decisions are having consequences. The partnership has created a second 10-year study. The city and the council member are bringing online a new kind of economy into the city. So there's got to be a focus not only on feeding the kids and getting them ready to get out of school. One of the things, I'm having a big argument with folks in the higher education arena. It is hard for me, I'm going to use old economy terminology, and I'm going to use an old economy picture. we're on an assembly line. Pre-K, early childhood education is the beginning of the assembly line, and you're near the end of the line at the four-year higher education institution. There's product coming off the line with deficiencies for whatever the reasons. I don't want to argue whether it's teachers, I don't want to argue if it's testing. And what's happening? One of the major things the legislature passed this session in the education space was their reform development education to make it more innovative based on some models around the country. So this is basically the concept of development education. We have those kids who do stay in school and graduate from high school, graduating insufficiently college ready. So we will give the higher education institutions money to get them college ready in a semester or 2 semesters. The big part of what drives down the persistence rate, persistent fancy word for you keep coming, is most kids, significant numbers of them, minorities, black and brown, end up in development education. You're paying for a class that doesn't generate college credits, and you are frustrated because you can't make your way out of math, so you give up on coming to college. You give up on coming to college, whether it's HCC, TSU, U of H, Rice, UT gets development education money. I've been arguing for the last year that we ought to start this transition. Over the next, let's call it 5 sessions, we ought to start transitioning development education money out of higher education and send it back down to early childhood education and help use that money to fund statewide, all-day, universal pre-K in the state. Everything tells us that if that young person has pre-K education and is more prepared, they will be in a better position to graduate from high school on time and be college or workforce ready. If we want to change, we've got to give up thinking inside the box. I went back, Amanda, and I was reading Hart's book, Gary Hart's book, A New Democracy, because I was trying to figure out what is the kind of things we need to do going forward in the state and in the country. And one of the things he says is if you try to address today's challenges by sticking them into the framework of the past, you miss the future. I worry that we are missing the future for our kids because we aren't paying attention to the things that are being put in place. And Houston is a great city on the surface, but there's so many people that are not included in the economic opportunities that are here and that will be coming here. And if we are not careful, we could turn out to look like other places. Peter Brown was the first person to really write about this. And if you read Judge Ed Emmett, the county judge's op-ed piece in yesterday's Chronicle, it's ostensibly about the legislature's rev cap idea. And Peter Brown was the first person, the judge reaffirmed it. The city's population is growing, but the rate of growth in the city of Houston is substantially slower than the rate of growth outside in the county. It essentially means that as a proportion of the county, the city's tax base is dwindling, and it's going to have complications for the city as you go forward. And we've got to pay attention to those things, not just the urban gardeners, not just HISD by itself, but as you pointed out, one of the things we're going to have to do a better job at is figuring out how to work together. In affordable housing, they call it stacking resources, to find all the people who are trying to do good in a particular space and better coordinate how we use those funds. There's a great thing, it's on Medium. We'll send it out. If you've not been on the email list, we'll cycle back some of this stuff for you. And it's the president of LIFT, and he's writing about what he calls the fourth transportation revolution. And I call it a business plan in good planning language. but the vision that Lyft has for autonomous vehicle and what it will mean to how cities are transformed in their physical development going forward, and what it will mean for folks, policymakers have got to start looking at those things, but not just policymakers. One of the things is policymakers have got to have an educated audience to interact with in terms of community stakeholders, so that they can make decisions in a conversation with a group of informed individuals so that it works out for the best. So today is the start of that conversation. I'll stop there and fire away at Ms. Wiggins, and I'll stand over here and call on you. Yes, ma'am, in the back. I saw the hand.
How you doing? I'm really glad. I work for the Near Northwest Management District, and I'm also active in the economic arena, trying to do some change there. My issue and my situation is, and I'm very impressed with Mr. Robinson about all the things that you've been saying. I've been saying and seeing the same thing, wondering why no one else is saying or seeing. And I know that if we choose see and say, and I know Amanda sees and says, then we have to start to have a conversation with those who are representing us, who are seeing but not saying, or they're saying and not seeing, or they're seeing and saying and not doing. But my question is, when we talk about the children, I have two questions. My first question is, you said Saturday and Sunday feeding. In your own vision of how this could happen, how could we as community leaders assist you in get that conversation on the table, get that conversation going, get that done? How, if you and you had it all to do yourself, how would you do it?
I would do it just like I did it in Detroit. One of the reasons I was recruited to Houston is because of the things that I did in Detroit that brought us some national attention. It's about collaboration. I don't think that a school district can do it by itself. It has to go out and seek partners. That's the reason I believe in parent engagement offices. That's the reason I believe in not-for-profits. That's the reason I believe in colleges and universities. My strongest partners in Detroit when it came around food was Michigan State University. That reason it was Michigan State University, that was our ag school. So I had all the economists, I had all the agriculturalists, I had everything. I believe in the faith-based community. I'm from Detroit. We got some of the biggest churches in the nation. So we did that. So I just went to the Baptist missionaries. I said, missionaries in your name. And so I got them engaged. It's about a collective issue. It's about a collective and us deciding we want to feed children. How did I feed children on Saturdays and Sundays? I would go down to that little church in the corner and say, don't you have some kind of program going on for your children? Let me know what programs you have, and we can provide meals because it's outside of school hours. The school system, I could sponsor stuff that nobody else could sponsor because I had an agreement with the state. So it's about getting the community educated, deciding who's going to do what, because we all can't do everything. I mean, one of the disappointing things that I had been working on when I was leaving Detroit is that I will tell any rec department in any city in the country, you have no business feeding kids. You're supposed to be out there with jump rope and all kind of group activities and teaching them all kind of stuff. You're not out there to try to feed kids or manage a food service contract. That's not what your objectives are. I would tell, not-for-profits that are trying to do workforce development, you're not out there trying to feed your people. You're supposed to let the people who do that and use your energies to do other things. So it's about us all recognizing what our strengths are and leveraging those strengths to provide a more effective service. So you can do it. I mean, it also required me not recognizing that I only work Monday through Friday, but I was out Saturday and Sunday in the community. And living in the community is something else that I believe in as well.
Okay. My second question goes to you, Mr. Robinson. You were talking about, and you too, council member, you guys were talking about the technology piece of this whole debacle that I think, if we resolve, could actually solve more problems than it creates. The one thing I have not seen, and I would like to see, put it in everybody's mouth, is the first thing we need to do is these babies are coming here jack ready. You plug them up, they can go. Why are we not teaching them coding? You know, why are we not putting coding, financial responsibility, accounting, these types of things that could be put on the level that these babies can understand it? Because you can't give her a penny and tell her that's $1. She knows the difference. All I'm saying is they need to learn how to code. When I was in school, we had to learn how to type. Typing was not negotiable. You had to have typing to graduate. These kids don't have to have typing. They don't have to learn data entry. They have no relationship with a computer unless they have it at home or outside the school system. I'm not understanding why, if we see these problems, we're not being more vigilant. And I'm vigilant, but I'm just one person. But if we could require coding, we start them off with A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now put your finger on that. A, B, C, fine. If we start coordinating things that they're going to have to deal with and live with, I think it'll be a better situation for us going forward. So I'm wondering, what do we need to do to change the curriculum with HISD, RD? I'm in Aldine, and I mean, everybody's got this big thing, urban planning, urban community gardening, all that stuff that they need to survive. We know what they need. Why are we not incorporating these things into their knowledge base at a very young age, at all-day pre-K? I can spend 4 hours with her, and I need a break. If we had an urban garden, harvest time, you know, and yeah,
Grab
you
that
know,
mic and
so
give it to the
all I'm
council
saying
member.
is,
Take the
all
mic
I'm
to the
saying
council
is
member.
that we have to incorporate the things that they need. They need to learn how to code, financial responsibility and accountability. They need that. They need that. And those are some things in the curriculum. I think that if we put them in there, it's just not there. I'm just.
Thank you.
Now, I think that's a really excellent point and comment about thinking differently about how we're educating our kids, because we're not educating them to be prepared to be successful at life. We're educating them to pass a test, a standardized test, but that is no indication of how you will be a fully functioning, successful adult. And so looking at what are those skills that are foundation blocks for the types of jobs that will exist tomorrow. Looking at coding, part of what we recommended in our recommendations to the city with our Technology and Innovation Task Force is to introduce innovation in inventor-like curriculum in the school settings. I was a judge just several weeks ago, about a month and a half ago, at Texas Medical Center. They had these second graders presenting to us their inventions. And when I tell you those second graders were the most prepared young people I'd ever seen, they had acting coaches helping them with their pitches. I thought these kids were on Shark Tank. And they had great ideas. These kids were trying to make a huge difference in the world and had done it in a way that was really well researched. So my point is, kids can thrive when challenged, but you have to challenge the child. And you have to challenge the child in relevant ways, in ways that are applicable to the future. So I agree with you. The way, your question related to how, the way to do that is through your school board. A lot of people underestimate the importance and significance of school boards across the city, and we have many because we don't just have HISD, you're in Aldine ISD. And so advocating on the school board level, holding those elected officials accountable for more than the regular conversation, asking the question, how are you preparing my students for the job of tomorrow, rather than it just being a conversation about testing. And so, you know, I'm a graduate of Aldine Independent School District, went to Eisenhower High School, and the level of emphasis even back then, and I'm a little older than I look, but the level of emphasis back then on the test was, it pales in comparison to what is being discussed and how much time is eaten up today. So demand more of your school district, and don't stop there, because they don't just make these decisions in a vacuum. This is coming from the state of Texas. So our great state known as Texas is requiring all this testing, and it's it's not to say that you can't have it, but you can't have that exclusively. And so how do you integrate these other concepts into the curriculum is the challenge that you must pose to your school district, your school district boards. So I would encourage you to do that.
Let me go there, see, because I got Amanda, and I'll answer you after the end, but let me go here and then Blodgett Urban Garden. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask Dr. Wiggins,
Oh, it's just Mr. Wiggins. I get so many honorifics.
Yeah, will you grab the mic?
Yeah.
you said Texas not using their ones.
I didn't hear you, ma'am.
You said Texas.
Hey, would you give her the
And
mic?
we found out that Texas was not using their, some kind of program that they were not using, fully utilizing.
No, ma'am. The regional director from the USDA sat in my office and told me that Texas was not maximizing its USDA dollars, and what could he do for me to ensure that we were spending more dollars in child nutrition program, quote unquote. So, and that's the reason I'm going to Austin tomorrow to try to give them some ideas about what we need to do. But I can tell you about your urban garden situation here in Houston. You guys need to form a collaborative because you're just spending money. And why don't you have a mutual tool shed? Why don't you have a mutual seed collecting? Why aren't you doing some things like even sharing for farmers market stand? I have a program in Detroit, and I had to harken back to home because I had a high school program where I started my kids. I paid for this out of child nutrition monies. I started my kids in September. It gets cold, and they would meet 18 kids, 6 teams. They met. They decided what their garden was going to be. They decided to grow their transplants. They decided their own marketing plan. They decided their customer base. So now I get a call from them yesterday. One team made $500 at its market stand. We have to teach kids that there's value in work. A guy named Wendell Berry said to teach kids about food and not teach them about food production is absurd. What some of the things you learn, you don't learn everything in a college classroom. You learn in practical experience. And so we need to do more things that's community-based. I think the community, I think the community needs to be more responsive and to take more responsibility for determining how they're going to help their children. But when you start talking about issues of poverty and issues, you got to lead by example. And one of the things you do, food preservation. Our kids don't know anything. They know Hamburger Helper. They don't know about peaches, and they don't know about eating tomatoes straight off the vine. Try to raise in your urban garden. Use your urban garden as an experience. Don't just raise regular red tomatoes. Teach kids they're green and they're purple and they're black. Squash, eggplant, all those things that they can incorporate in their diet, but it also helps them make choices. So I would tell you that the USDA monies for urban gardening, you could make it go further if you engage those people who can sponsor those such things like school districts.
Thank you.
Going that way?
Yes, Ms. Wiggins.
Yes.
My name is Kirk Jackson. I'm a proud graduate of the urban planning program at TSU. Also president of Blodgett Urban Gardens. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. I think you came out to the garden.
I found me a garden to work in, yeah.
Okay, that's our garden. That's Blodgett Urban Garden.
I live right over here now.
Okay. What I wanted to ask you is, in the model that the garden provides an opportunity for education and nutrition, what level of success did that model look like in Detroit?
Well, here's it, because I partnered with the right people. I partnered with the science department, and we developed a curriculum that was taught to our children. I formed contracts with the school principal that says, you have to dedicate a teacher who's going to be responsible for this garden. That teacher has to come to training once a month. Then that teacher has to go back to that school and train the other teachers. And in exchange for that, I'll give you 6 garden beds, I'll give you a hoop house, I'll give you seeds, and whatever it needs. but it was about having it recognized as academic pursuit, support academic achievement. There's so many things you can teach in a garden to children: geometry, also ecology, things that they would not have gotten in the classroom. We even planned field trips. I took senior citizens. I'm a big believer in intergenerational. My garden attendants, I hired with child nutrition money, garden attendants who were all retired senior citizens, factory workers. One of them was my 75-year-old brother, and teachers, and they embraced the children. And the wisdom and the camaraderie that these two people, that they shared, changed the kids' perspective about this is not just stoop labor. This is not sharecropping. This is not, the kids in Detroit don't know anything about it. They know about changeover, not having a job for 6 months out the year. But the things that you can do to enhance the community, bring the kids in, bring older people in. Older people don't realize, I don't want to be bothered with those kids. You just don't know how much those kids want to be bothered with you. They really do want that. So that's where, you can spend your garden like that. And that's what my model looks like. Anybody want to get, if you go ahead, if you book 6 weeks in advance, you get a $196 Southwest ticket. That's what I do to keep going back home every now and then, to see what it is. And or Google us. It's called the Detroit School Garden Collaborative. You can Google us and you'll see that we've been very, very successful.
Well, let me further say that, I guess we're behind like a lot of things in the rest of the country here in Houston, but we are working on getting up to par with the type of model that you described with the Mickey Leland Center and the collaborative group that we're trying to get underway called the Houston Urban Farmers Collective. And Logic Urban Gardens is collaborating with Baylor College at Ryan with Dr. Williams.
Yeah, Tanisha,
Yeah, So we're moving in that direction. We're a little bit slow, but we look for your help.
Can I tell you one of the things? You have so many, it's like you got so many things going on. I couldn't even tell you how many gardens there are in Houston. There's so many, but if you all just had one meeting and you got together and set the standard, then you could apply for grants and leverage that number, that body of people, those ideas. We know you cannot just you over here and I'm over here and this and that and the other, and call it what? What are you calling it? You compete with one another. I was telling Dr. Williams and another young lady from another garden, look, I didn't come 1,700 miles to referee a sorority fight. So, we're going to have to come together and figure out what are we going to do around this thing called urban gardening, urban farming, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't make any difference as long as I'm growing some food that I can sell to the community at a reduced price to ensure that they're getting more fresh fruits and vegetables. I don't care what you call it.
Good. Let me take one more question, because I'm past my allotted time, and I'd like to give folks out on time. But if y'all want to stay, we'll stay and take questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Brittany Martinez. I attend Vermont Law School, focusing on environmental law and policy. And my question is specifically geared to us staying in our lane. How can the legal community help in addressing these issues of food security, specifically in Houston? I know that nonprofit law firms like Legal Aid can't lobby help from City Council and are very limited on the amount of the role that they play in policy making in that sense. But do you have any suggestions of what we can do?
How lawyers can help.
Oh, gosh. One of the things that I belong to a group called the National Farm to School Network. And what lawyers have done for us is research issues such as procurement issues, so that how do you use food? And also they file lawsuits in terms of food equity. Or, I'm waiting for the lawsuit. If some lawyer had the guts to do it, is file a lawsuit against the gas stations for selling food with empty calories. You don't sell beer to children because it's demonstrated they're not responsible enough. Why would you sell candy bars and stuff like that clearly the medical evidence shows it increases obesity and such. So lawyers have a role if nothing but for advocacy, policy, helping people write policy. Because most of the things that come out to USDA, you need a law degree to understand what it means.
I have work for you to do after I'll talk to you. Any other questions? If not, I want to acknowledge the representative from Senator Sylvia Garcia's office. Young man, stand up and wave. And there are closing remarks. I'd like you to say a few words on behalf of the senator. Don't look around. You work for the senator. Don't act like they work for the senator. Come on up here. And you tell Sylvia Carole Robinson to say thank you for sending you, and we appreciate her support. Sylvia Garcia is a graduate of Texas Southern University.
That's right, yeah. Hello, how y'all doing? My name is Alex Guajardo. I work for State Senator Sylvia Garcia, and that's exactly right. The senator is actually an alum from Thurgood Marshall School of Law, and I'm actually a rising 3L there at Thurgood Marshall School of Law as well. But I did want to say she couldn't make it, this evening. Although from what we've shared here, it's been a lot of good, productive, and a robust discussion. And I must say, now that we are in a special session currently, I think these are some of the issues that we can definitely raise for other members, and from what I've seen and what I've heard that have been raised for others, representatives and senators, to bring it to the table. And I mean, it's definitely something that you plant a seed from one community to the other, from one advocate to the other, and from here we continue to develop. But I do appreciate again the time, and thank you all so much for your time and your ears.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I look forward to receiving your email. As soon as I do, you will be on our email list. Do not unsubscribe because we're sending you too much information. Knowledge is power.
What is your email address? We've already been chatting.
We met at
Bernie. And then I gave him my spreadsheet.
I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Chicago. You know, I'm still from Chicago.
Congratulations.
I
Man, we got to get together. We got to.
there's no
Oh, we need to have a meeting with you telling us how to do this. What's going